greetings to all our viewers. This is African Rising Soon TV. Today we have a very important guest speakers. We have in our midst Mr. Knox Musebenzi. He is a manager director of the Nuclear Industry Association of South Africa, as well as project manager for NESCA, the Nuclear Energy Corporation of South Africa. Knox has a degree in electrical power engineering from the University of Cambridge. He is joining us via Zoom from Johannesburg. Good day, Mr. Knox.
Good afternoon.
We welcome you, sir.
Thank you. Pleasure.
We have also Mr. Lawrence Freeman. He is a political economics analyst for Africa with 30 years of experience on the continent. He is a physical economist who promotes real economic growth with emphasis on hard infrastructures, particularly in rail and transportation and electricity. He joins us from the United States of America. We welcome you, sir.
Very good. Glad to be with you today.
Thank you, sir. And we have also Mr. Rowland Ataguba. He is an expert on railway infrastructure development and has worked extensively around the world. He's the CEO of Bethlehem Rail Infrastructure Limited, the project assurance of advisor on the Lagos Ibadan Standard Gauge Railway Modernization project for the Nigeria Federal Ministry of Transportation. He joined us from London. We welcome you, sir.
Thank you.
We also have Dr. Walter Karungura, a professor and Pan-Africanist from Kenya, but he's still going to join us soon. So I'm Christopher Ndairagije. We will co-host this debate with Madam P.D. Lawton. I hand over to you, Madam.
Thank you so much, Christoph. And thanks to all our panelists. It's going to be a really interesting discussion today. So I'm going to pose some questions to each of you, starting with Knox, and then Lawrence, and then Roland, and then Christoph to finish off. Coming to you, Knox, first, because without your sector, energy, poverty in Africa cannot be ended. Manufacturing can't happen. Industrialization of economies can't go ahead. Electricity is the backbone of any economy. So in your capacity as an energy policy strategist, how do you understand the current state of Sub-Saharan Africa's energy deficit?
Energy is the cornerstone of economic development because that's where you would have expanded industry, industrialization, modern agriculture, increased trade, and improved transportation. The African continent, just by way of background, we have 600 million people in Sub-Saharan Africa that have got no access to electricity. We have got 900 million, in other words, in addition to the 600 million people that do not have access to electricity, there's 900 million people altogether, including those that have got electricity, that use dirty or hazardous or unsustainable energy sources for cooking. So you have a situation where people have got electricity in their house, but it's too expensive. They use it for refrigeration and TV and light. Then they make a fire outside using charcoal or firewood or whatever. 48 countries in Sub-Saharan Africa have roughly the same installed capacity of electricity as Spain, but has got 18 times the population size. Gives you a picture of the deficit that we're talking about. And of that capacity, which is the same as that of Spain, over 50% of this is in South Africa only. So energy poverty is a major issue in our continent. The solution to address this is to include all energy sources, that is coal, nuclear, renewables, including hydro. There is not two ways about it, in my view, that we cannot afford choice. The United Nations. Sorry
to cut in.
Yeah.
Please carry on.
Oh, okay. The SDGs, the United Nations SDGs 7 and 13 call for access to electricity and taking steps to combat climate change. And SDG 15 talks about the management of forests and preventing biodiversity loss. Energy transition in many instances on the African continent means transitioning from wood or cow dung to electricity. That's what we're talking about. Whereas perhaps in first world countries, it's transitioning from coal, oil to other sustainable forms of energy. So we're talking from a different perspective. The issue about fossil fuels, despite the climate change story, Sub-Saharan Africa contributes less than 3% of greenhouse gas emissions. Therefore, to press this continent in terms of reducing its use of fossil fuels is somewhat unfair. Developed countries actually did develop on the backbone of fossil fuels, and they are where they are now because of fossil fuels. Basically, the Industrial Revolution attests to that. there is some kind of hypocrisy from developed countries, such countries like Germany, that are pushing for renewable energy only. And while at the same time, they are busy opening new coal mines, and they are actually ditching nuclear power generation for whatever reasons. But the Ukraine invasion, or call it whatever, call it invasion or special military action, has exposed many nations in the Northern Hemisphere in terms of that vulnerability. Renewable energy is very important in Sub-Saharan Africa. It's absolutely necessary, and it has got to be deployed where it is appropriate. Because renewable energy tends to be intermittent, except for hydro, you need to have power that is reliable, that is on 24/7, 365, in order to be able to industrialize and be able to have a viable economy. The case for nuclear is what I will argue in a little bit more. I will argue about it in terms of the technical, environmental, economic, and regulatory framework. Technically, we need base, alluded to earlier on, to say we need power that is available 24/7, 365. Unfortunately, with sources of energy like solar and wind, you only have solar during the day and wind when the wind is blowing. And storage technology is not yet at a stage where it is commercially viable. We often speak about a battery backup. There's been a lot of development on battery technology, but if there was any breakthrough, you would not find the same battery that was invented in 18 something still being used in a car, in the bonnet of a car. We need energy that is dispatchable. You can actually switch it on and off, increase or decrease the output as you wish, which is not the case with solar and wind, unfortunately, but it is the case with hydro. We need dynamic operation. We need a system of energy that has got inertia, that is renewable energy and nuclear, quite frankly, are not competitors, but are actually supposed to be complementary technologies. Mm-hmm. From an environmental point of view, nuclear is clean and green. It has got no greenhouse gas emissions during operation. It is safe operation. There's been only 3 accidents in history. Never mind the fact that the accidents were actually quite bad. In fact, the worst power station accident in the world was a hydro dam in China, which killed many thousands of people. So that is not normally quoted, but what is typically quoted is the 3 Mile Island, Chernobyl, and Fukushima. But if you look at the statistics, nuclear is probably in fact, it is one of the safest energy sources statistically over the years, even considering all the 3 accidents that have happened. They also have got small land footprint, and nuclear waste is managed very well and adequately. Anything that is not appropriately utilized can kill. Water is one of the safest substances on earth, but it can kill thousands of people if they drown in it. So anything that we do not handle properly can be quite hazardous, quite to think about it. The economics, nuclear has got high upfront costs because of the construction, but low running costs. We need to find sources of funding so that the interest rates are low. This is where the World Bank and other institutions come in. Well, I'm glad to find that with this crisis in the north, countries that were reluctant or sitting on the fence with regards to nuclear are now beginning to say we're going ahead. United Kingdom announced yesterday, I think, that they are going to be building new nuclear power plants. They are going really big. The Danes were thinking about exiting nuclear. They are changing their mind and they are extending the lifespan. Nuclear power plants have got a very long life. They are typically designed for 40 years, but this was just a nominal figure, which was meant to make sure that the regulatory regime is kept on its toes and making sure that everything is fine. But the life can be extended to up to 80 years. So if you have got a nuclear power plant, a generation plant that can last you up to 80 years, and if you pay for your loan for the investment in the first 20 years, you basically have got 60 years of near free electricity. It creates a lot of employment during construction and during operation. You need a high level of skills, and there's an opportunity for Africa to uplift its game like the rest of the world. The advent of small modular reactors is a game changer because it reduces the time of the lead time in terms of construction. Cheapest forms of energy is not always the best. Some of the people were arguing in the case of South Africa to say we are going to put renewable energy, solar and wind, and we'll back it up with gas that is being imported. And look at what has happened to the price of gas as a result of instability in the world. So cheapest at a time does not necessarily mean is the best for an economy. Let me talk about the regulatory framework. Nuclear being what it is, it's a highly regulated form of energy. It is subjected to high quality and safety standards. This culture generally raises the professional competence of any nation. Any nation that takes nuclear can pride itself in saying we have got a higher level of quality and safety standards. The International Atomic Energy Agency is mandated by the UN to assist nuclear power generation. The Forum for Nuclear Regulatory Bodies in Africa is around 34 active member states. And most of these member states, the involvement in nuclear is around the nuclear research reactors, not power generation. Only power generation plant on the African continent at this point in time is in South Africa. But there also is a lot of nuclear regulatory framework because uranium naturally tends to occur together with gold. As people are mining gold ore and uranium ore coexist. And therefore, in the process of mining gold, there is a lot of uranium that is recovered. And you need a regulatory framework to make sure that people are not exposed to even those low levels of radiation, enriched uranium, natural uranium. A number of countries are at different stages of engagement with the IAEA. So it basically puts us in a situation where we're saying for the African continent, it is time. There is just no way we can bridge this energy gap unless we employ all the energy sources, and in particular, nuclear. I think with those few words, I'd like to say thank you.
Could I, thank you so much, Noxum Sebenzi. Could I just get one last question for you? In the past, I've heard you speak about the necessity for the continent as a whole to have an integrated master energy plan. You've explained in the past about the fact that regions have energy pools. So, for instance, Zimbabwe, Zambia, South Africa, hopefully DRC are sharing their electricity supplies, and that's happening elsewhere in the continent. But I've heard you speak about almost a Pan-African approach to electricity generation. And you said that, that this strategy will not only bring unity, but it'll also bring a great amount of goodwill if neighboring African countries, regions are sharing in the overall energy supply of the continent. I mean, would Grand Inga would be a great example of that, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. Grand Inga is an important example, not only from a point of view of generation of electrical power, but from a point of view of water, making that water available for irrigation and stuff like that. The idea of coming together is not peculiar is not just for the United States has got so many utilities. All these utilities have got somewhat way of being interconnected, so that when one utility is running short of energy, you can pull or wheel the power from another part. The EU is an integrated network. Some of the criticisms for not introducing nuclear on the African continent, or the disadvantage was that the grids or the electricity demand in some of these African countries are so small. The idea of putting a 1,000 megawatts power plant when the grid of a particular country is maybe 1,000 or 2,000 is not kosher. But if you come together, several nations come together and pool and cooperate and build nuclear power plants so that they can wield this electrical power, that would help. Can you imagine if the west coast of the West African coast has got many nuclear power that feed inland? Ghana, Nigeria, Algeria, no, not Algeria, Niger, all the way right up to or Cameroon in the southern part, and all the way up to
Senegal.
Gambia.
Yeah.
Senegal, Gambia, that sort of thing. So it would change the face of that part of the world. East Africa, the same thing. Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda does not have a coast, and so they would have to rely, if they are putting nuclear power plant on the coast, particularly for cooling. You put nuclear power plants on coastal on the sea for cooling purposes, but you can still put nuclear power plants inland, particularly the new small modular reactors that require very little water. They can be built inland and they can be made quite small. Southern Africa, countries like Botswana and Namibia and Angola can come together and generate electricity to feed their grids. So yes, the idea of pooling is to spread the risk. It's like a health insurance. We pay into the same insurance, but we fall sick at different times, and therefore we get the benefit rather than just putting money aside as an individual for when you get sick.
That's such a fascinating idea, to have that whole coastline of West Africa all creating this huge amounts of energy. And am I correct in thinking that Ghana have very, very recently, excuse me, decided to go forward with the small modular reactors?
Yes, indeed. The Ghanaian Nuclear Regulatory Authority has come out and said by the end of this year, they will have decided on the siting of the small modular reactors. The good thing about small modular reactors is that they don't really have to be on the coast, as I alluded to earlier. They can be anywhere where there is some water. In fact, they require less water than coal plants, because there's very little cooling that is required in their process. So the water is probably going to be required for potable water for people that are operating these nuclear power plants. Nigeria is also on the way to doing the same thing. Kenya is way ahead in terms of that. We know Egypt, but Egypt is not Sub-Saharan Africa. They are already building. And Uganda has spoken about that. So a lot of countries have shown an interest. Zambia has indicated that it is interested, but I think they will start off with the research reactor and move on to do the power generation later on. So as I say, the small modular reactors have opened the way for a lot of these companies to be able to do these things, these countries rather.
Well, thank you so much, Knox. It's always good to hear about the future of Africa. And I think, as you rightly say, nuclear is definitely the way to go, along with everything else, that everything that is available must be used to industrialize all the economies as much as possible. So thanks so much.
Pleasure.
And turn now
Hello.
Hello.
May I make my contribution? Thank you, everyone, and sorry for coming on late. I quite agree with the comments from Knox, but my approach to it will be slightly different. That we need to have a master plan. We have to get the beneficiary countries to come together. And I'm speaking this from, I've spent a lot of years in working with energy, including Olkaria. Maybe you already know, in Rift Valley, that's a geothermal plant, and the hydro. I think in Kenya, we talk about energy mix. And then we are talking about the regulatory and also goodwill from the governments, and therefore it will be necessary for the beneficiary countries really to come together and have a master plan and prioritize, because the capacity of these countries is not the same. For example, South Africa is way ahead in Sub-Saharan Africa when it comes to energy. With a master plan, we'll be able to see, prioritize the energies that should be implemented in terms of generating power, because we are looking at a deficit of almost 640 million people are not connected. And if we can prioritize, we can be able to see which country has the capacity to have the nuclear energy. Then, of course, we have other nuclear energy mix, like hydro, solar, and then we have got geothermal and so on. I think I'm speaking this from the point of view that unless we get support from African governments, we have a challenge, because most of the regulatory frameworks that are in place and the authorities are actually patronized by politicians, and therefore they have influence, and therefore most of these regulatory authorities are not able to sustain expansion activities of energy. And therefore it's important that we first create a forum for this, the Sub-Saharan countries. And once we do that, we can be able to come up with a master plan, and then we can be able to implement, and in stages. Those countries that are not ready can come later and be able to see the kind of energies that are available for them to be able to use. Because I think, as we are aware, without energy, we are lost. We cannot be able to make any progress. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Karangura. Yes, exactly. This Pan-African sense of doing this all together is absolutely necessary. I'm going to turn now to Lawrence Freeman. Lawrence, you are a physical economist. I wonder if you could please explain that term and what it means in terms of Africa, and is this the way, the approach to the physical economy, is this the way to alleviate poverty in Africa?
Thank you very much for co-hosting this interesting webinar today. I call myself a physical economist because I'm trying to change the conception that people have of economy in their minds. One of the biggest problems we face in the world, in the West and as well as in Africa, is people have a very poor, if totally erroneous conception of what wealth is. Now, people think wealth is money, making money on Wall Street, derivatives, stock trading, day trading. And this really is not wealth at all from my standpoint. A financial system is not wealth. A financial system is necessary, although I would term it more appropriately a credit system. But the system itself, which is necessary to facilitate aspects of the physical economy, is not the economy. So what is the economy? Well, most people are taught it has to do with free trade, buying low, selling dear, all beginning with Adam Smith. In fact, the original conception that Smith has comes from a fellow called Bernard Mandeville, who wrote a poem about bees. And basically his theory was that the interaction of all these bees, which are equated to human beings, desiring pleasure and avoiding pain by all their individual pain and pleasure reactions, they serve the greater good. And this is supposedly the invisible hand. Of course, the invisible hand is always there to steal your money. But the idea is the invisible hand is somehow the interaction of various human beings in seeking pleasure and avoiding pain is how an economy operates. And of course, there's no truth in that whatsoever. An economy is actually the self-organization determined by human beings to organize their society in such a way that it continues to perpetuate itself. And it will perpetuate itself if it's a successful economy. The criteria is that you will produce an increase in the standard of living for your population, and you will increase the number of people. So you have two criteria which are connected: the increase in total wealth and the increase in total population. And this is what a productive economy should be able to do. And we're talking about tangible wealth, physical wealth in terms of what has just been presented in energy, railroads, agriculture, a physical, tangible product that society needs. Now, the production of wealth is done by a productive labor force. That is, within the entire workforce of an economy, there's a section of that workforce which actually performs what we would call productive labor. There are many other occupations which are necessary, complementary, and essential. Education, scientific development, classical educational development. But the actual labor force is involved in acting on the physical universe to transform the physical universe into producing the existence for humankind. And that, therefore, what we're primarily concerned with in physical economy is how do we make improvements to raise the productivity of the productive labor force. This is our main concern that we're involved in, is acting on the physical universe to produce more wealth from one production cycle to the next production cycle. Now, how do you produce more wealth from one period to another? And this brings in the essential questions of science and technology. Each economic mode of production for each production cycle is governed in a sense by the level of education, scientific knowledge, and technology available for that production cycle. If we change the dynamics of that production cycle, then we can change the outcome. How do we change the dynamics? It's through science and technology. The human mind, the only force we know in the universe that can actually discover new physical principles embedded in the universe. And as we discover those physical principles, we then, results are seen to us in new technologies. We bring in a new technology into our current mode of production or our current economic system, and we find that we can produce more wealth with the same or less effort. And for example, what the previous speaker brought out, if the African continent were to begin to proliferate the nations were to begin to proliferate nuclear energy in their economies, which is something Anta Diop discussed 60 years ago. But if the African nations were to do that, we would not only see an increase in the energy production, but we would see an increase in the entire physical economy. And we would see an increase in the level of education, skilled labor, science centers, because you'd be mastering a new technology that is not new to the world, but is not being applied in Africa. And this would be an upgrade or an upshift of the entire economy. Now, how does this work? The human mind makes a discovery in the physical universe, which is then transformed by other humans into a technology. How does that technology then change the economy? For example, machine tools. Machine tools produce all other machines. If you change the technology or machine tool design, you change all other forms of production in your economy, because you'll be producing those new machines based on a new design of machine tools, which are the essence of an industrialized economy. How many machine tool plants do we have in Africa today? Just like how many nuclear energy, we know we have 2 in South Africa. The other area where you change the economy, improve the economy, is through infrastructure. Again, as you bring in a new technology, again, such as fission, or let's say more advanced fusion, which we should have had already, that new technology embedded in your infrastructure platform then changes the total productivity of every member of your society. Every farmer becomes more productive when he's surrounded by density of energy, by density of clean water for society, by density of railroads. So the density of infrastructure and the technological level of the platform of infrastructure are fundamental ways that you actually change the economy. You bring in something new that's been discovered by man for the economy. Now, people don't understand that the purpose of economy and society is the development of human beings. There's no contradiction between the development of human beings and the development of the physical universe. Human beings are governed by a creative mental process, and the universe is governed by a creative process. And therefore, the universe is there to be intervened upon by the human mind for the advanced propagation of the human race itself. And therefore, in changing and improving physical economy, we are not only increasing the physical output of goods, but we're actually increasing the power of each individual member of that society. Even if the majority of members of society do not partake in the productive process, they participate in an economy of a rising standard of living and of improved technology and scientific capability. Now, this also begs another question that's involved in physical economy, which is your scientific, cultural, educational level. Is a society producing the scientific level that is necessary for new discoveries? Is the educational level of the population sufficient for the members of that population to assimilate that new technology, that new scientific level? And are they able to transmit that? So by looking at the physical economy from the standpoint of the mind of man, you see that the entire society should be organized to promote this quality of development of the human being, which leads and is completely connected to the quality of development of human life itself. Now, many people think Africa is overpopulated. I had this problem with many of my friends who are sort of ignorant on the issue. Over the last 30 years, I've been traveling to Africa. Africa is not overpopulated. There's not too many people. There's not enough people. There's entire parts of Africa that are completely underdeveloped. There's entire parts of Africa where agriculture is completely underdeveloped. So it's not a question of population. It's a question of development. And what we need to do is we need to have African leaders begin implementing, as even discussed earlier with the question of Ghana and other nations, have to begin to understand the coherence of one concept of a physical economy in a society and promoting those policies that will actually raise the level qualitatively and quantitatively. Now, this also has very serious implications for education. This has very serious implications for security because we're approaching the security question in many cases all wrong. So therefore, what I think about and what I suggest other leaders think about, is what inputs do we make in the long term, which then reflect into what we have to do in the short term, that actually change, improve, advance the physical economy as part of the entire development of society.
Well, thank you so much, Lawrence Freeman. There really was a lesson in the science of the physical economy, that this is a science and it is entirely achievable. What you were saying about the freeing of creativity is such a beautiful thing. And it makes me think of something that someone you have spoken much about, Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana. He once said that I am not African because I was born in Africa, but because Africa was born in me. So that what you were speaking about really made me think of those words of his. So,
well, this is a big problem we have in the West, because actually it's affecting all our thinking and our policies, because people wonder why is the foreign policy from the United States wanting in so many areas. And it's because we don't have, the United States culture is declining, because we've lost the respect for the sacredness of the human mind, which I would call the mind soul. And you also see this in Africa. Some of the confrontations that take place in Africa are completely brutal, very brutal, in the wars that go on and the killing that goes on. And therefore we have to actually fight to reimpose or re-educate people, both in the West and in Africa, on the sacredness of human life. There is nothing comparable on the planet of any species to the human mind, to the human soul. And to exterminate it, to kill it, or to degrade it by not feeding it, or by allowing poverty to eliminate people, is actually a crime against the universe.
Yeah.
yeah. Thank you so much, Lawrence. On that note of qualitative and quality and creative, and the necessity to do all of this in the spirit of reverence to mankind, we move to you, Roland, at Taguba. As you have, within your capacity of the many things that you do, particularly in Nigeria, for the railway network, but one of the most wonderful things, hopeful messages that you bring to the world is a proposal to fast track the African integrated high-speed railway network, which is one of the greatest game changers for the entire continent. So I believe Christoph will leave a link to your previous interviews you've done on your proposal itself to fast track the network. But I wonder if you could explain to us what this high-speed railway network will bring to the continent as a whole, and what those qualitative changes are.
Okay. Hi, and thank you. It's been quite stimulating listening to all these very clever people talking about their specialist subject areas. And it's always fascinating just listening to Larry talk about economics. Man knows the subject so well. The African high-speed rail network, very interesting concept, and as you rightly conceded, is a game changer, except we just, as with a lot of other things in Africa, it's like we're sleepwalking, and the opportunity is slipping us by way of our generation, because it's something that's going to happen. Maybe we want to leave it to the next generation, because the children coming behind us are very smart, and they're going to pick up these things faster than we know it. However, and as Philippa has just introduced, there are things that can be done to enable the speeding up of the development of the network. And essentially, what is the integrated high-speed rail network? Is a network of networks, because every country, and I think about 54 odd countries in Africa, has a network internal to it. And what it is at the moment, very few of them are connected to the networks of other countries. And so the entire concept of an integrated high-speed network is one that integrates the networks of one country with that of the other. It's just interconnectivity. And of course, the problems that currently make that difficult is one, there are different standards that are in use. And this derives from history, from the colonial history. The British, who colonized parts of Africa, had a different standard from, say, the French. And so we have different gauges of railway. And of course, because of developments in Africa, also, with a lot of wars and poverty and the economics of it all, a lot of the railway networks also, internal railway networks, also fell into dilapidation and disrepair. And so the coming of the concept of first regional networks and then integrating those regional networks into a global network started to gather steam from, I think, with the coming of the Agenda 2063. And that was, I think, it was a Lagos meeting, I think it was about 2013 or so, if not earlier. Anyway, in answering your question as to what Ashwan brings, is essentially one, connectivity. We have quite a few landlocked countries in Africa, and they need access to the sea. And such a network enables that access. And of course, given the way we've stacked it up, it is possible for some countries to have multiple access. And what this does is it creates or engenders competition. And I think a case in point is when you think about countries like Rwanda, who are landlocked, there is now the possibility of access to the sea, to the Indian Ocean, through either Mombasa or through Dar es Salaam in Tanzania. Now, this enables these two ports to compete, and the various lines also, from Mombasa through Nairobi, through Kampala, that's now linking, or that's proposed to link Rwanda, creates an opportunity for the network from Dar es Salaam, coming through the back, up to compete with that, and the ports will then compete. And what that does is it enables efficiencies. It also improves productivity because you introduce competition into the mix, and you find that people are able to improve on the standards, raise their game, and ultimately it enables greater productivity. Again, it offers corridor route options, i.e. the alternative multiple accesses that we talked about earlier. The fostering of intra-regional trade is another benefit that the high-speed rail network offers. And of course, the opening up of the hinterland to development. when you look at the development of countries within Africa, if I speak to Nigeria specifically, you would find that a lot of the hinterland in Nigeria was developed because of access through railway. It was the railway that opened up a lot of the hinterland. A lot of the major towns of today in Nigeria were developed as a result of the railways offering access and mobility. And therefore, we have this potential for development and for growth. And one of the handicaps, or shall we say, reasons for Africa's underdevelopment, as you may say, is that historically, there's been very little intra-regional or intra-country trade within Africa. Most of the trade that has happened in Africa or that currently goes on in Africa is Africa or individual countries with the rest of the world. So from the ports, they're going abroad. They're going to Europe, they're going to Asia, they're going to the Americas, but not within themselves. And this is as a result of the poor transport links between the countries. You couldn't imagine that if you wanted to travel, say, from Lagos in Nigeria to Ivory Coast in Cote d'Ivoire, which is only about 3 countries or 4 countries away from Nigeria, that the transport links are tenuous and quite difficult, that it's probably even easier for you to catch flights to go to Europe, say France, from Lagos, and then come back to Cote d'Ivoire. Totally crazy, if you ask me. And this is because of this lack of the infrastructure to connect these countries together. We've had a lot of the concepts on the table for a long time. The ECOWAS had a railway or even a transportation master plan that is now been integrated with the rest of the African master plan. But you see, these things are also taking quite a long time to come to fruition. So we're doing quite a lot of talking, but not walking that talk. And these are also part of the issues that need to be addressed. And this is also because of the weakness of the global institutions. The AU, great, but the AU is not an EU. It hasn't got the authority, or the authority hasn't been, sufficient authority hasn't been surrendered to it by the individual state. And notwithstanding, even with authority being surrendered to it, without the necessary resources to back that up, to enable it to do what it needs to do, then a lot of walking the talk wouldn't be taking place. And this is one of the current challenges that we face as a continent. There's a lot that needs to be done, but having the political will to address them is still lacking. And therefore, we would need to make hay while the sun shines, as it is. I don't know if that's enough for now, or if you want me to carry on, Philippa, please just tell me.
Well, Roland, I find it all very interesting, and coming from you, we couldn't, honestly, we couldn't hope for a better source. I would just like to ask one quick question about the fact that the railway is high speed. So we're talking 160 kilometers an hour, and how that fits in with what Lawrence was talking about in terms of African economies being able to go from a colonial relic of a railway line to 160 kilometers an hour, or even better, as they've got in Tunisia, I believe, where it's 320. So this very, very high speed. And that in itself is pushing the technology. So if, and we can only continue to pray that it happens, this integrated plan is completed sooner than 2063, it will have the ability to leapfrog so many economies into an entirely different plane and an entirely different league. Would you agree?
Very much, very much so. The reality, though, is that the term high speed is actually a misnomer, in the sense that not all of the network, certainly initially, is going to be high speed, because again, as Knox and Walker highlighted in their presentations earlier, there's still a huge infrastructure deficit in the area of power. High speed in railway is electric. There's a huge gap in terms of power supply in quite a number of African states. Nigeria in particular has very low generation, and I don't have an idea of when we can really hope to have power sufficiency. The good news, certainly as far as railway is concerned, is that the infrastructure requirements in terms of the railway itself is the same for normal, or shall we say, regular railway and the high-speed railway. So we can achieve speeds of about 120 kilometers running diesel trains. For high-speed electric trains, you can go, say, about 200 kilometers an hour and above. Morocco, they're doing 320 because it's all electrified. Now, the electrification can certainly come up later as the infrastructure improves. But building the basic infrastructure so you can have the connectivity is important. And this is why I'm kind of dubious with the use of the term high-speed railway. And I think a lot of people actually sneer when you use that term in Africa, because it's like, well, you must learn to walk before you can run. Stop talking about high speed. But there are parts of Africa that are running high-speed trains right now. Even the Addis to Djibouti, the high-speed network, because it's electrified, and you can actually build up on that and improve on what you've got. So the use of the word or the phraseology, you may say is aspirational, but it's certainly achievable. It's not something that's going to happen in the first few phases. I think what's imperative is how do we enable this ambition to be realized sooner rather than later. And it's in the frameworks that you put together. One, there is need for ownership. Who owns it? Right now, everybody owns their networks. So what's been built in Nigeria belongs to the Nigerian state. And that's the whole idea behind it. You build up your network, but then connecting it to the network of the next country or to your neighbors then becomes a need for coordination. And this is where AU and its institutions come in. One, you need to develop a framework. You need to develop a timetable, a schedule, so that you can somehow coordinate the developments as they happen. Just leaving every country to develop its networks, and a lot of them have been running into hiccups. I can tell you certainly about the Nigerian one. For instance, there's been a funding crisis that's been brewing because the Chinese have kind of slowed down in terms of release of funds for the development of the internal network in Nigeria. We've had similar problems in Kenya, for instance, where the Chinese have pulled back, in Uganda, and so on. So these have certainly affected the speed with which the networks are developing. These are the internal networks. And therefore, there hasn't been much of a stomach to talk about the regional networks, and so on and so forth. So there are those challenges, but if you had a central coordination, what it does is it gives a global view of what is happening, and therefore you can start to tinker with these plans as you see issues arising. But right now, what's going on is everybody's working blind as to what the next person is doing or the next country is doing. And that can't be helpful for the overall progress or overall outcome of an integrated network. And of course, there's a further key qualitative imperative. If I don't know what you're doing, it may turn out that where we eventually meet, I may actually miss the meeting point. And that could be a disaster waiting to happen. And that's why it's imperative that someone within the AU, we did have a High Commissioner for Infrastructure, Raila Odinga. But I'm not sure that there was much that was happening within the AUDA or within that office in terms of coordinating what was the evolution of this high-speed rail network. And so it's still where we really are the last time we spoke about it,
Wow. Thank you so much, Roland. Not a realistic look at the situation we're in. I hope not too depressing. Yeah. Maybe on that note of challenges, and one of the key critical challenges being the financial challenge and the funding of everything, that being energy, manufacturing, railway networks. We turn now to you, Christoph. And I'll just read out your bio because I don't think we got your bio in the beginning. So Christoph Nderagije,
yes,
is a businessman, graduated in business administration at the University of South Africa, and author of the book, Africa, the Rising Economic Power, Pan-Africanism that seeks to promote and achieve Africa's financial independence from the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, and China. So, Christoph, questions to you would be, you say that you promote Africa's financial independence from these bodies. Could you go into that and explain your proposal for Africa to fund its own development?
Yeah, thank you so much, Madam Lawton. It is great what we had. I think it has been very good to how you have been able soon to our TV. You have been our new viewer. Then you managed to invite good people and professional people. We have learned a lot for our channel. We say thank you personally for our channel. And we really appreciate your work that you did. And our channel TV is based on Is Africa Rising TV. It has domain purpose to promote 7 points that are in my book, Africa, the Rising Economic Power. But the first most important point is to fight for Africa financial independence. We know Africa political independence in the 1960s. So now we believe it's time for Africa financial independence. We've seen many projects failing because of that. So we believe it's time to fight for our own finances. So our TV promote and always insist to all 54 African presidents to sit urgently around African Union, the body of the African Union, and create continental taxes to every good and services that are exchanged in Africa. And they can be able to collect $30 to $70 billion every year, which is a projection of almost $500 billion every 7 to 10 years. Is this possible? Yes, it is possible indeed. When we look at, for example, between 1970 to 1994, there was what was called Mandela Tax in Nigeria. It managed with 2% putting to the salaries of civil servant employee, public employees. They managed to collect almost $61 billion within 20 years. and their GDP on that time was around below $50 billion. What you look, for example, now in Nigeria, it is almost $450 billion, which means it has grown the past 20 years, almost tenfold. And this is the same scenario with almost majority of African countries. They've grown tenfold their GDPs, but we see in Europe, it had grown only twofold. So if Nigeria managed to collect such amount of money alone on that time, with the economy, which was a petro economy only, and now it's kind of diversified. But if we see now, and we have these 54 African countries, we are capable logically to be able to collect this money ourselves. Then the second step will be to create our own IMF and World Bank, which is to be kind of infrastructure fund. And this fund, we now, the third point will be now to build two infrastructures. Remember, this collection can be done by the private sector. There's what they call privatized collection of tax. This is happening in Australia to some of the taxes. How they use it in Australia, there's many tax that they can use the private sector to collect taxes in exchange of 10 or 20%, and we can be able to be more efficient and reduce corruption in the process. So there's no excuse of saying that there's much corruption. By the way, since long time, we are collecting taxes, so we can be able to collect. What we need is a body which is under African Union, which have enough power to go there, install it safe to every country, and be able to separate continental taxes to local taxes. The third point then will be to build two main infrastructures that we already spoke now here, which is Grand Inga Dam and integrated high-speed railways. These two are capable really to improve lives of our people. The first one, the integrated high-speed railways, the way Lauren said, is really very, very, very important because we have to know that first, there are 3 points. First, Africa is empty. Africa is big. Africa is 30 million kilometers square, is equal to United States of America surface area, added to China surface area, added to India surface area, added to Argentina surface area, added to European Union surface area, which are almost 20, all those 5 countries, 29 and something million kilometers square. But we have 1.3 billion people, there are 3.6 billion people. So they are 3 times more, almost 3 times more than us. So when, for example, there's a production of bananas, for example, in Uganda, or potatoes in Rwanda, nearby my country, Burundi, or tomatoes in my country, Burundi, we don't manage to get the market because it's far each other. So this railway will play a key role in distributing those products to the next market. Is very, very key. The second point for the importance of this integrated high-speed railway is that 30% of African countries are landlocked. So they are the poor, 14 of them, there are 16, 14 of them, they are ranked as the poorest countries in the earth. And they are the richest, among the richest countries in terms of minerals. And those minerals, some of them, you cannot transport them using the normal roads because they are too heavy. For example, in my country, they've got a reserve of 250 million ton of nickel. They cannot transport them without having railways, but it's the poorest country in the earth, it's the richest country. When you look at the reserve itself, when you put in terms of value in money, it's the richest country. So you can understand this dilemma really. We have to have this integrated high-speed rail built. There's this Grand Inga Dam that also is very important because its capacity of having 40 to 44 megawatt electricity capacity. So we know that almost 40% of African countries have got less than 1,000 megawatts of installed electricity. France has got 4 times the electricity than the whole Africa. And France gets 70% of electricity of France comes from Niger. And Niger get only 50 million US dollars every year from there in terms of aid and so on. So this is key to know that we have potential on was talking about other type of energy coming from uranium. We can be able to do this. But the Grand Inga Dam, what is good on that? It's capable now, as we know, with all the statistics we have with Grand Inga Dam. It has got capacity to give each African country almost 7 to 1,000 megawatt each. Then we are capable to have a stable, cheap electricity which can be able to electrify all capital cities and commercial cities of Africa. So this, we can build it ourselves. And this is very, very important to build the Grand Inga Dam. But we have to know the history of Inga Dam. In 2014, the World Bank wanted to finance it. There were so many pressures that to finance it. They saw that it was important for Africa. But when they did all, they started to finance it, then there was a problem. There was what is called International Rivers, NGO, which went to the Congress of America, United States, US Congress, and they asked them to vote against Grand Inga Dam because they say there was some issues of paying loans for Congo and so on. And the Congress voted against Inga Dam at the World Bank. And in 2019, the same International Rivers came to here in South Africa, and they used what another NGO called, I think, OM, which fight against corruption. And they insisted to the Congress of here in South Africa to not allow the government to finance the Inga 3, because the Inga has got phases. There's Inga 1, Inga 2, Inga 3. Inga 1 was built by the dictator Mobutu in 1980s, so he could not pay. So there was no good stories about that. But now that's the problem. So we cannot see how Inga won't be, is very important for Africa. What is lacking, there's no more confidence for Congo to finance these projects. Africa have to come in. That's where come now, these continental taxes be more helpful. Congo DRC will just enjoy its parts as where this Inga is. So, but now as we speak, Germany is trying to get Inga energy and export it in the West and use it as an alternative to Russia. They've been there in, I think, 2000, leaders of, in the plan COVID-19, they were there trying to negotiate with the Congolese government and convince them to use Inga as an alternative for their energy. So you can see that we are really sleeping. We are really sleeping, and this is clear. And it's because we don't have these finances. That's why among these 7 points, this is the main key fight that we have on this Africa Rising Soon TV. We are fighting for this point. We want to be more pragmatic. That's why we are calling all our viewers to join us in the Assembly, African Union General Assembly, which will take place in 2023. We want to be there. We want to be there, and we want to insist this idea of creating our own money, that we can create a debate, we can create a division among our leaders because we have power. We are the owner of the African Union. We can try to influence it as much as possible. We take our time, but we have to put this debate on the table, an alternative to look at this option. We're looking at the finances from our own people. As African, and you have to know the other point is that Europe taxed 2 to 3 times more than Africa. They've been doing that even to World War I, World War II. They could even go up to 90% when it comes to income tax. They usually know how to use tax when it comes to problems. So we have to know we're in the emergency time. We have to know that Africa will triple its population. If we don't do something, I'm afraid we are in trouble. We're gonna see people. I'm sorry to use this word. We're just gonna eat each other. They're gonna be so much trouble that we are responsible to do something. That's why we call all our viewers to register, and then we want them to come and that we can go. There's no money involved here. You're just gonna buy your ticket. You're gonna book yourself a hotel. We meet if it's in Addis Ababa, where it will happen, this African General Assembly, we will go there. and then we will pose this idea to be on the table, on the process, to see if we can bring up something more productive. So this TV is not, is not created of speaking what is happening in Africa, what happened in the past, and so on. So we have to go for pragmatic actions and come up with something that is very important. And this is not something, as if anyone wants a book, it's a free book we can send to you. This is a testimony. You can understand this is from God. It's from God. You can read our testimony. It's not easy to explain. It's an experience that is a personal, but this is a call from the Lord. The Lord has helped Africa without him using William Wilberforce in 19th century and to take us out from slavery. I think Africa people could be in trouble as we speak. So he wants us to be free financially, and we call all viewers to be able to register in our emails, panafricandestiny@gmail.com. If you want to join us in January 2023, we have also a Zoom by September. Then we have your point, how can we go about it efficiently and professionally. So this is the first point that we are fighting for. The second point is we are fighting for the second point I said, to create this IMF World Bank, our own IMF and World Bank. The third point is these infrastructures, and the fourth point will be, we know that Agenda 2063 has got a plan to unite politically Africa by 2063. But they said on their plan that we have to debate how to go about it with a new constitution. So we have a proposal on this TV that we have to have election of our parliament in terms of languages. Africa has got 2,200 languages. Languages should be a base of our constitution as a united Africa. We have to do election that if every language elects, then from there, this parliament can elect a president. In the process, that's what we bring in, because in the process, with our next generation, they might use it as a point on the debate that they can be able to look at it. It's very important because languages cross borders. We've got 2,200 languages, they cross borders. And then when you see, for example, Nigeria has got more than 500 languages. Congo has got more than 200 languages. They stay together. They don't speak each other. They don't know, they don't understand each other, but they stay to a place called Congo, which Congo is the name of one language. So countries, we cannot be based, do a United States or a kind of, we have to base on the language, because these countries are new. Like Nigeria was created in 19-something. It was started from South. When you look, for example, Tanzania was born 1960s. So they are new than languages. So languages are key, are very important when we go in terms of constitution of the United Africa. So this is very important. And if they stay together, if Nigerian people, 500, they cannot hear each other, stay to a place called Nigeria, then why not this? They cannot stay together in the whole place which called United Africa. So this is a debate that we want to bring and want to make out there. Once this Agenda 2063 reach on that phase, they can look at it, and it will be much more productive. It will be much more strong when we base in our diversity. We give more value on our diversities, then we base our constitution in terms of languages. So the fourth point is, number 4 is that one that I finished. Number 5 is we have got a problem in Africa. It's about now these sub-region organizations. We have got almost 39 sub-region organizations in Africa, but we know only ECOWAS, SADC, we know East African community, but there are 39. And it is the only continent that has got a lot of sub-regionals. For example, Kenya belongs to 10. And Congo DRC belong to 11, I think. So this, when you look at it, of course, they are looking at the market. They are seeking market, but behind they seem to seek the privilege from the projects come from the West. So we are weakening our intellectual capacities, our times, and so on, not looking at continental scope. So we have to make sure that we get all the effort on the continental scope with the Ghanaian Continental Trade Agreement Secretariat, where we dissolve all the ECOWAS, we dissolve all this, then we focus on that trade agreement secretariat that was created. We can move more faster because it has got the aspiration of whatever we are seeking to others. So if we look at that aspect, we move much more faster. So this is what we promote on this TV as well. So there's also point 6 is how we can industrialize Africa much more faster. We are trying to ask African countries, governments, to try to kind of act as a private sector somehow at some extent. For example, if they can create industrial areas, seeking loans the way they seek loans for roads or other infrastructure in the country, they go out in China and India. There are these 2 competitive machineries for industries. They are not cheaper, they are not expensive as before. They buy the first identified product they usually import, and they buy those machineries, they produce those goods. When they reach those industries, small industries reach at the growing stage phase is usually around 3 years around there. Then they sell them. Then they have to they create it, they produce, and they sell them as early as possible, not to keep them even if they are performing well. If all African countries does that, then we are likely seeing industrialization, a fast industrialization as we saw in China, because by the way, China 1980s, that's how they started. So now it's very important. There's no way we can just sit and say, okay, IMF said this, we cannot go into the business of, no, we have to convince them, we have to look at the emergency with our demographic trend. As I said, this is really very, very dangerous. We have no time to sit. We have to do as urgent as possible, all means to industrialize our countries. So this is number 6, and number 7 is our force is African standby force, which I think is based in Cameroon. So this is lacking money, but when we have got this financial system, which we have to create, which has got a base from the bottom. Remember, as European taxpayers suffer to control Africa, it is time that African taxpayers suffer to save Africa. We have to create that base. Then from there we create infrastructures. Then there we feed our African Development Bank, and we create it as our own IMF and World Bank in terms of assets. We are capable of feeding it after we build this infrastructure almost, because if those infrastructures, we can make them as a continental, and somehow we get shares, then we feed this money to the African Development Bank, still continuing to collect these taxes. Then we manage to create a fund of our own. This is money, we can create it somehow. Then we create this money, a stable base in long term, and we create our infrastructures. And from there, now, the money will now come down. That's how we see we are capable. When you create one market which physically interact each other, we get your own finances, you get at least 10% goes to military standby, a force which can easily fight. We've got 3 million active soldiers in Africa. Is the biggest in the world. So we've got, even if our expenditure in terms of military, we've got almost is equal to Germany. So we are capable to stop any terrorism at anywhere when we've got our fund. Because many things we don't do it because we must keep quiet, because we have fund, we depend on this and depend on that. But when we have money, our mind will start to be clear and look really at issues more objectively. So when we have this fund, that we will be able to have our Africa standby force, that we really, even if really reduce this coup d'etat that we see anytime anyone, also people with plan to destabilize Africa, it won't be easy because we'll be able to have our own finances. So this is what we are fighting for. And then we are calling all our viewers really to join us and send emails. And then on the process, we have to tell you that it's time to stop speaking negative things. We have to focus on these positive things. The Lord is calling us really to go out there and get our intrinsic value. And then he will be with us. And he's with us until now. Then he will be able to help us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Christoph. Thanks. So people can get your book and read more about your proposals, Africa, the Rising Economic Power. And really the point of this conference is to, as you're saying, is to push the Pan-African narrative away from challenges, the problems, the history, and push it to a solutions-based route to the future, so that we can build a future Africa as quickly as possible. But that Pan-African narrative has to change at all levels to realize the future that all Africans need. So on that point, thank you so much. I don't know if anyone wants to ask any questions. Should we open the floor to questions, Christoph?
Yes, yes. Thank you so much. Thank you so much to join our TV for this debate. It's a very fruitful debate, technically. We say thank you. I don't know if you have questions. You can ask each other questions. But I still have a question for energy. For Mr. Knox. Is still with us?
Yes, I am. Yes, I am.
Yes, yes. Can you go much deep and tell us how secure is really using this type of energy that an alternative, and how successful will be Inga in comparison with others? Because when I saw it, there was a company which was studying the environmental aspect of Inga. When it comes to environmental aspect, how do you see and how do you find out? Is it more than the other alternative you have?
The issue with Inga, I think the advantages are obvious in terms of both conjunctive use of electrical power as well as water, controlling the water. As Yoweri Museveni said in one of the videos that I watched, he said we've got the Congo River faithfully every year returning billions of cubic meters of water into the sea, and the water is not needed in the sea. We need the water. Okay, coming back to the energy thing, the challenge with Inga is that it is localized. And in fact, I wanted to ask you a question. You said something like the Germans are interested in Inga energy. I think it will be a challenge to transmit power from the central Congo to Germany. It is just perhaps, unless they were willing the power through the various countries. Otherwise, I don't think it will be quite feasible. I don't know. I may need a bit of clarity on that. But the point I'm making is that the disadvantage with Congo is that it is localized. Nuclear, on the other hand, particularly with small modular reactors, can be deployed at scale. You can have a nuclear modular reactor at 50 megawatts, at 100 megawatts, at 200 megawatts, and you can locate it close to the load, close to the city, close to the mine that you want to develop. You don't have to have an infrastructure of vast transmission lines from Inga to the various places. That is the one point. And then I think the second point is, with concentration of population along the coastal areas. When the example that I gave was West Africa, cities like Lagos. If we could build nuclear power plants to supply enough power for the city of Lagos, never mind going up north to Abuja. If we could do that, for instance, that would be a game changer. If we could supply Ivory Coast and go right up to Senegal, as I said before, and make sure that those cities, people who live in those cities, have got sufficient electricity 24/7 and affordable electricity. Then we can really turn those economies around. So we call it an alternative, but it has been around. Nuclear energy has been around since the Second World War, basically, when Eisenhower made that famous speech of saying atoms of peace. Instead of killing people with nuclear energy, let us divert this source of energy to electricity generation. And it has been around. Even small modular reactors that we're talking about have been around for a long time, except they were not used commercially. They were used in submarines. So the technology is there. It has just not been migrated into civilian use, which is the process that a lot of the companies, there are probably over 70 companies throughout the world that are experimenting or rather developing small modular reactors. These are sometimes some of these reactors are such that they're basically plug and play. You manufacture a nuclear power plant in a factory, just like you manufacture a Boeing plane, just like you manufacture the European aeroplanes in a factory. So you bring it on a ship to a site and plug and play, basically. Some of these nuclear power plants, you don't even have to refuel them for up to 7 years. You basically bury it underground wherever you want to put it, and you simply just operate it and get your power. So this is going to be a game changer, except that it has not yet been commercialized to the extent that we're looking for. But we're just around the corner. Many companies are already doing that. The first company or the first country to have put on the grid a small modular reactor is China. They already have a working model that they have connected to the grid. So it means in the next few years, you are going to see a proliferation of those small modular reactors. So you can have a situation where municipalities will actually say, no, I want you to put a nuclear generator here for this suburb, supply this suburb. So they are so versatile and they can be located all over the place. So this is really going to be a game changer.
Okay, thank you so much. If I don't cut you, I was looking at this point. At this point also, I was reading here and about this Germany. Germany is written here, Germany could soon enter an energy partnership that would seek the Central African countries, mean DRC, to provide hydropower capacity to produce green hydrogen for Germany decarbonization plan.
It's for the plant in Congo, not for power to go to Germany. Okay, now I understand. They want to build a plant in Congo. So I misunderstood you to be saying they want to import electricity from Ingadem. No, okay. So this
so
is.
Can you elaborate how it goes? What is in relate to what we are saying? Can you elaborate how?
No, the power from the Ingadem is going to be used to generate hydrogen, which is an alternative fuel to the fossil fuels. Hydrogen is a clean fuel, it's got no emissions and whatever. And in fact, it's a better alternative to even electric cars, because electric cars at this point in time have got a limited range. You don't have an electric car that can go for more than 350 kilometers without recharging. So hydrogen is coming is a source of fuel that can be used to power internal combustion engines in an environmentally friendly way. So I understand now Germans want to build a plant in Congo, but the plant is going to be powered by hydro, which is green energy. So now I understand. I had a question about that.
Okay, thank you so much.
Can I just say, and in addition, Knox, to what you're saying about the SMRs, that's a South African invention. Is that right?
Well, South Africa developed that quite a lot. Initially, it was started by the Germans.
Right.
Okay, let me step back. The type of small modular reactor that we're talking about was started by the Germans, and they put it aside, and then South Africans took it up with the pebble bed modular reactor. There were other forms of small modular reactors, like I said, which were used by the navies, the submarines, the nuclear submarines that are in nuclear countries, the Soviet Union of yesteryear, the United States, France, and whatever. Those were using small modular reactors, but which were not commercial. But the first commercial small modular reactor was going to be in South Africa, but unfortunately, politically, it was the Chinese actually bought some of this technology and finished the product, and now they've synchronized it onto the grid.
Thank you.
The question of nuclear energy is not really understood. There's many people who think somehow the nuclear energy is dangerous and are somewhat fanatical in their anti-science propaganda. And this takes place in the West as well as among Africans. And that the idea of the Inca Dam is something we should support because it does have a potential, but it's still not adequate, because even 50,000 megawatts is not adequate. We have to think about how do we bring the standard of living of Africans up to the standard of living that we enjoy in the West, or used to enjoy before we started to collapse. How many megawatts of power do we need? My estimation is about 1,000 gigawatts. So we need 1 billion watts of power, probably. This is something that most people don't think about, because as Knox said earlier, countries don't even use a great deal of their energy. Somebody came up with a statistic that X number of countries in Africa use 1,000 megawatts or less. I don't remember the number, but I would like to know it, because that means that the country is totally underdeveloped. You have countries that have barely increased their energy throughput, like Ghana, for example. The biggest investment in Ghana's electricity still goes back to the complex built by Nkrumah in the 1960s, the Volta Dam energy complex. So if we're thinking about transforming Africa, we're thinking about not the current levels of use of energy, but what should be the levels of energy that are available and have to be redundant in case of disruption for Africa to become for the nations of Africa to become industrialized in, let's say, the next 20 years. And therefore, most estimations that I've worked with countries, they estimate far too low in terms of what their energy needs are, because they're thinking about just how to get by or exist. But that's not acceptable. Not acceptable when you think about the future population growth, and not acceptable about the pathetically low standard of living that most Africans are forced to exist in. Nigeria is the most egregious case of inadequate electricity, but the problem exists everywhere. And the West is not thinking in these terms. China is, Russia is, India is, the West is not. France is really an outlier because they actually are building nuclear energy and have expanded it. The Germans were idiots. They shut down the whole nuclear energy industry. And these crazy schemes about setting up solar collectors in the desert in North Africa and then shipping that energy to Africa, to Europe, this is an insult to intelligence. Why would we want to do that? Solar energy, like the battery storage energy, is never going to be sufficient to industrialize a nation. And so why make the desert worse by filling it with solar collectors? We have to really have a robust program to move. Every nation should be having nuclear energy plants. The standard one has been 1,000 gigawatts, but now we have the SMRs. And we have to think about how do we raise the standard of living? Now, nuclear energy also brings in, as I mentioned in my remarks, brings in new technology. So by bringing in a new technology in one area, you actually transform the economy. You make every citizen of that nation more powerful. And it also serves as a tremendous jumping off point to nuclear fusion, which Chikantadea also talked about in the 1960s. So there were people on the African continent who had great vision about the future. The problem is we haven't had people following that up, and the West has gone backwards. So this is something that the West will help in limited ways. I think General Electric will build some plants, but they're not going to take the lead. It's going to have to be Africans who understand the need to industrialize their nations. Without industrialization, we're not going to survive. And that requires energy, enormous amounts of energy, not a little bit here and there. That requires infrastructure, such as Roland has discussed, on railroads. Those are the two most important, not the only ones. And we have to have a visionary, aggressive plan, not to accept a little bit that we may get here or there, or how do we work with what we have. We have to put together a bold, visionary program for what it will take to actually have African nations with their populations living at the same standard of living as the best nations in the world.
Yeah, thank you so much, Lawrence. But I have to go back to Enoch. But it's true. Inga has got little capacity when you look at those size that really Africa need, even if in long term. But when you look, for example, countries like Rwanda has got 200 megawatts of electricity, Burundi less than 100 megawatts of electricity. 40% of them, imagine a dam that gives them 500. So it will change. Remember, Africa has got a lot of small countries here and there with concentrated people. So this will help. Inga, we really help in terms of capital cities in the short term as we go. It's a beautiful alternative when it comes to one project in one place, resolving in a short term a certain part of this 40% of countries, really, which we help a lot because they are part of Africa is a lot. It's almost half of African countries. But I have to ask Enoch again, when it comes to nuclear energy, we know Inga can produce 40 to 45 megawatt of installed electricity with 100 to 120 billion dollars. When we look at what they are explaining, what about now nuclear energy with such capacity? How much we're going to invest? How much do we need when it comes to finances?
Well, I think that one thing you have to look at it differently. Knox has the right approach. We have to use every bit of energy we can.
Yes.
So I want to burn every lump of coal I can.
Yes.
I want to use hydropower.
Yes.
I think wind power is actually cost inefficient, and solar power not industrialized. So we have to use everything, and I think that the Grand Inca should have been developed a long time ago, and what didn't get any support except primarily from South Africa for many, many years. But the question is, it's not an option whether we move to nuclear energy, because these plants scheduled for 40 years of existence look like they can maybe make it to 70, 80 years or more before you have to replace them. And now with the SMRs, we have a totally new capability. But I think the standpoint we should have is not if, but how. Because without nuclear energy, we're not going to make it to develop the countries of Africa. And there's too many people who are saying this is not possible. There's some ignorant people saying this is dangerous. And as pointed out, except for Chernobyl, nobody's died from a nuclear energy accident. People have died from everything else, including tsunamis and starvation and energy poverty. So we're not really dealing with a technical problem. We're dealing with a question of investment for the future.
Okay, I just want to, sorry about that, to intervene again. I just want to make it clear to our viewers how the Inga, as we speak about, Inga is a very well-known Pan-Africanist, And now you are bringing about the nuclear, which is very, very good alternative as well. As professionals, you know really what is very important for Africa. But now tell us, how fast compared to Inga to produce 40,000 megawatt of electricity with energy from nuclear, the time, how fast, and to produce 40,000 megawatt of electricity in terms of time, in terms of finances.
Like I said before, building of nuclear power plants is not cheap. But what is happening now with the small modular reactors, the modularization and the building of these plants in a factory is basically what we are entering into a phase where Henry Ford managed to make the internal combustion engine affordable to Americans by perfecting the skill of manufacturing such that the cost to the customer becomes less. So this is where we are going with small modular reactors. At the moment, the big nuclear power plants tend to be quite expensive because each one is a unique one. It needs to be specially built and whatever. But where we are going to is a situation like we are building Airbus and Boeing, where the unit is complete. Your Burundi Airways, you simply order that aircraft and commission it, and we're going into that area. Yes, at the moment, probably the comparison between hydro and nuclear may be favoring hydro. I'm not so sure about the statistics, but most of the comparisons has been between nuclear and coal. Coal is definitely cheaper than nuclear, but coal power plants do not last as long as nuclear. But also we've got this challenge of environmental issues. So the costs are going to perhaps go higher because of the need to clean the air, to reduce the emissions and so on. So traditionally, coal was cheaper. Gas is a lot cheaper and is a lot quicker. Talking to the issue about the time it takes to put a nuclear power plant onto the grid, with the small modular reactors, because they're being manufactured in factories now, the time from the decision to make and to get the nuclear license and to get the nuclear power plant operational has been reduced drastically to below 5 years. And the reason for that amount of time is because there are laws and treaties that need to be obeyed, and the public needs to be consulted and whatever. Nuclear, you cannot just wake up one morning and decide I'm going to put a nuclear power plant there. There's a whole process that requires licensing and making sure that you prove beyond reasonable doubt that your plant is safe, which is the technology which is unfair to nuclear because no other technology is required to do the same amount of safety assurance. This is why it takes a long time. This is why it is generally more expensive.
But if you look at the Grand Inca, you have to build several more Incas. I think the Grand Inca is going to be a total of 8 dams. So you have to build several more. I think there's 3 now. And that's going to take time. And then you have to build the transmission lines that are going to go north, south, east, and west. So there's a lot, and it should have been completed already. So there's a long time that's going to elapse before we actually get even the 40,000 megawatts from the Grand Inca. But as Knox was saying, these small nuclear reactors, modular reactors, can be and were intended to be mass produced. In fact, South Africa had plans to build the pebble bed reactor, which was a small nuclear reactor, many, many years ago, and they shut it down. So this idea that we can't populate the nations of Africa with SMRs, this is something that was thought about decades ago and could have been an African invention for the continent if it had not been shut down. So again, these things go back to the question of how we look at the future development of our nations. And of course, the other thing about nuclear energy is it's a more powerful form of energy. The energy flux density of a nuclear energy plant is higher than any other form of energy except for fusion energy. And therefore, we're actually not even dealing with the same form of energy. If we define it as work capability or work potential, nuclear is better. It's hotter per square area of meter that, and therefore it can do more work than any other form of energy. And of course, also such with hydro, you're still subject to water, the flow of water. Ghana and Ivory Coast both got hurt earlier last year because of a slowdown in the flow of water for their hydro plants. So really the case against nuclear is, the case for nuclear is really pretty obvious. And it's only because of a shrinking in our thinking that we even haven't moved more aggressively on this. But there are African leaders who are moving now, and that is encouraging.
We are approaching the end of the second hour, so perhaps we should consider rounding up.
Yep.
And our thanks go out. Personally, I'd like to thank everyone so much for attending, and I would like to hand over to Christoph for the final words.
Yeah, we say thank you so much, and to all the viewers, you have heard that we've got many alternatives. We are capable of having our own fund. We have alternative, not only INGA. We've also found that Africa need more, especially nuclear. With new technology, we are capable of really electrify Africa in full. This is very, very, very good that we can hear from there. And we again call you again, all the viewers, remember to register and to join us to our fight for Africa's financial independence. We have a Zoom on September, end of September, with all the participants who want to come to join us at African General Assembly, African Union General Assembly by 2023. It will happen end of January. So be ready and then write email, and then we take it from there.
Okay, well, thank you all. Thank you, Knox. Thank you, Roland. Thank you, Larry. Thank you, Dr. Walter. Thank you, Christoph. And good evening to you all.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
And bye.